Chapter 472. Thank you, Sister Yuan. Luo Nan expressed his thanks to He Yuan in the first instance after entering the long corridor. He was clear in his heart that He Yuan's original plan was certainly not like this. Following the rhythm from the beginning, directly bringing him into the elevator was the most reasonable judgment. As for why it became like this, the reason, He Yuan, you're asking for it. He Donglu, who was already rambling incoherently, caught up from behind. He roared loudly from far away. This complete loss of composure attracted the attention of a few rooms on the floor. The artists and staff who had yet to leave stuck their heads out to take a look. But very quickly they met Manager Sha's fierce gaze, and they immediately stopped and closed the door to protect themselves. However, He Donglu's brain had already been fried by the flames of anger. He chased after He Yuan, wanting to pull He Yuan's arm and demand an explanation. Old Si had no choice but to hug him when he saw that he was so irritable, but he didn't know how to stop him. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed when he saw this situation, but he heard He Yuan say, "Don't get distracted. Let the security personnel handle these chores." Just as he finished speaking, God had already walked to He Donglu's side. He extended his hand and took out a small and exquisite spear-like object, aiming it at He Donglu's neck. F***C He Yuan, that's enough. Upon seeing this, He Donglu's eye sockets were about to split open. He struggled even more frantically. However, Old Si didn't have the slightest intention of letting go. As God pulled the trigger, anesthetic drops were injected into the skin on the side of He Donglu's neck. In less than 2 seconds the world became peaceful. He Yuan swept a glance. Settle them down. Old Si pondered for a moment. Only Shi Wei's suite was considered convenient and easy to take care of. He excused himself to He Yuan and carried He Donglu inside. The others were still fine, but Supervisor Sha was already dumbfounded. This officer He Yuan could really be said to be iron-faced. She didn't even care about her own brother's feelings and treated him like a passerby. Just as he was thinking about it, someone behind him suddenly laughed. The secretary really treats the boss to relieve his worries and doesn't avoid his in-laws. But aren't you spoiling him too much? Cat Eyes found a random reason to get away and followed after him with the sound of her high heels clicking. To her question, He Yuan did not answer. Cat Eyes was unwilling to forgive him. Just now we directly pulled him downstairs and met up with the security team. Everything would have been fine and dandy. In the end things ended up like this. Don't you think it's funny when you put all your actions together? She directly pointed out the crux of the matter, causing the situation that had been eased with great difficulty to return to awkwardness. While the only one who felt awkward was Luo Nan. Luo Nan knew that Cat Eyes seemed to be targeting He Yuan, but in reality she was seizing the opportunity to take revenge. Every word and sentence was mocking him. Unfortunately, he was unable to retort, so he lowered his head in silence for a time. Focus. Only now did He Yuan open her mouth. She gave the same advice as before and then she turned to Cat Eyes. Since you are born human, your family and the impressions of your family are very important. For some people they are more important than others. It sounds sweet. He Yuan asked in a flat tone, if because of this kind of problem, it causes my mind to be distracted, my condition to be bad, and when I encounter trouble, what should I do? Since you're here and the security team, in this environment, do you trust the security team more or do you trust yourself more? Hey, Captain Gao is still here. Gaoda's face was expressionless. In the face of true trouble, the security team is only there to share the pressure, to check for weaknesses and make up for loopholes. I know you guys have military backgrounds, so there's no need to show solidarity here, right? Cat Eyes rolled her eyes. And then, you guys are going to act according to his temperament? He Yuan turned to look at Luo Nan. Harvest and effort are equal in principle. One more layer of change, one more job. This will consume even more mental strength. I believe that Mr. Luo has already made preparations. Luo Nan watched He Yuan and Cat Eyes communicate from the side. He already vaguely understood the reasoning within, but he was unwilling to speak at this time, so he remained silent. He Yuan didn't mind. She turned to Manager Sha and said, "We need an empty room." Right now, most of the artists, assistants and staff on this floor were heading backstage. Finding an empty room was the easiest. Even so, Manager Sha was still very nervous. A thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. He used the authority control software to confirm repeatedly before finding the closest room. 5610. This room is a bit small, but it's always been unused. It's clean. Manager Xia opened the door and invited the group inside. He wanted to follow along, but he was stopped by Gouda. Boss Luo. Manager Xia instinctively wanted to know Luo Nan's attitude. Even though this young man seemed to be lectured to the point where he couldn't raise his head, wasn't this the same situation in the elevator in the morning? When all was said and done, the one who gave him the greatest mental shock was this seemingly obedient young man. Luo Nan felt Manager Xia's fearful and expectant emotions, and he turned to give him a glance. There's nothing else for you to do. Go do what you need to do. Manager Xia let out a long sigh of relief. He nodded and bowed as he withdrew. Si Guoxing had also settled He Donglu down at this time and hurried over. Gouda closed the door after waiting for the relevant personnel to enter the room, isolating the inside from the outside. This place instantly turned quiet. Ever since Cat Eyes was reduced to a believer, she became more and more casual when dealing with people and things. She didn't care about etiquette and the like. She had already found a chair to sit in and she blurted out, "You're all professionals after all." But he was suddenly startled. Her gaze streaked across Luo Nan's face before falling on He Yuan. Hold on. Wouldn't a certain someone and his sister be separated like this? And he even ended up shedding tears of gratitude. So I'm the only one who's a vile character in vain? Luo Nan was stupefied in place for a moment. What she said seemed to be true. He Yuan didn't feel awkward because of Cat Eyes' words. She found an open area after entering the room. She crouched down and placed the silver-gray suitcase on the ground. She entered the password and everything proceeded in an orderly manner. Cat Eyes looked at Luo Nan. Boss, what are your thoughts right now? Luo Nan recovered from his sluggish state. He didn't know what to say at first, but his mind spun a few times. He unconsciously recalled the series of reactions he had in the elevator a few minutes ago. Soon he grinned and laughed bitterly. I'm thinking that if I were to be together with Moya and encounter an unexpected situation, I'm afraid I would really be done for if I were to be as conflicted as I was before. How would I have the free time to choose at that time? Cat Eyes couldn't help clicking her tongue twice. Your awareness has risen all of a sudden. Hey Vice President He. I didn't know that you actually had the talent to be a teacher. Is the He family an instructor in the military? He Yuan was silent for a moment. She waited for the silver-gray suitcase to open to ring out. Only then did she speak softly. With this awareness, Mr. Luo should be able to be more focused. This was the third time she had mentioned a similar request. Luo Nan took a deep breath and responded directly for the first time. No problem. Chapter 473. The suitcase was filled with equipment specially arranged for Luo Nan. It was very simple. There was a flesh-colored protective suit, an electromagnetic handgun, matching parts and a certain amount of ammunition. The protective suit was a tight-fitting standard, so Luo Nan needed to take off his outer and underwear before he could put it on. If this was before, Luo Nan would inevitably hesitate for a moment when faced with the gazes of several people in the room, especially those of the opposite sex. But right now, He Yuan's focused voice was still ringing in his ears. Mulling over these things would be a bit too petty. Luo Nan completely exhaled the breath he had just inhaled and exhaled. He directly unbuttoned his clothes, and his mind naturally attached to the equipment in the suitcase and He Yuan's introduction. He didn't care about anything else. The hidden snake type 2 protective suit is mainly used for protection against stab and poison. It avoids being ambushed in a chaotic or vile environment. However, you still need to be careful of the head area when you aren't wearing a protective mask. Using this kind of protective suit required a certain level of skill. He Yuan stood up to help Luo Nan put it on as she explained. Due to their current special circumstances, it was hard to avoid physical contact. Some parts of the body were quite sensitive, and this was 10 times, 100 times more stimulating than the attention of the eyes. Do you need help? Cat Eyes' wicked interest was no longer satisfied by watching from the sidelines with a smile. She took the initiative to stand up and walk forward. She was clearly asking for Luo Nan's opinion, but she had already started. She slid down while sticking to his waist. To the side, He Yuan's brows furrowed slightly. Before she could speak, she heard Luo Nan say, "My calf is a bit loose." His tone was calm and natural. Cat Eyes was startled when she heard this. She raised her head to look at Luo Nan's expression. Let's not talk about anything else. His eyes were half open and half sleepy. One side of his gaze was focused on the suitcase, looking at the accessories that he had yet to put on. The other side was probably his internal body experiencing the minute sensations after putting on the protective suit. Aside from this, he had no other thoughts. Under the repeated stimulation, this youth, who had always been wavering between two life circles, finally made a decision. He swept away those meaningless and distracting thoughts, gathered his mind and faced the present. It was fine for others, but Cat Eyes, who had long since become a member of Luo Nan's closed system, could clearly feel the power bursting forth from the core region. The majestic psychic pressure formed from this slowly covered every region of the system, regulating all sides and bestowing order. Cat Eyes was too close to him to the extent that she didn't even have the time to digest it. Her heart felt stifled. In her daze, she came to a realization. Her boss's hesitant human heart gradually faded, and his ruthless mind stepped forward to weave a new set of order that was most beneficial to the current situation. Once this order was formed, any countercurrent that attempted to break through would need to have sufficient awareness. Cat Eyes hesitated for a moment. In the end, she bent her knees and half knelt. Her knees touched the floor lightly in order to maintain her balance. Her fingers were separated by a layer of protective clothing as she touched Luo Nan's calf muscles. Is it here? Luo Nan's voice grew quieter and quieter. Above your heels. Here's a foot cover. Take off your socks and hook your feet. Cat Eyes did her best to reply with a calm tone, but in her heart she was thinking, I'll go crazy sooner or later. A dozen or so seconds later, Luo Nan slowly exercised his elbows, wrists, knees and feet. He gradually adapted to the slightly tight state of the protective suit. His training during this period of time hadn't been in vain. The skin-colored skin-tight clothing, which could expose and magnify all the flaws of his body, actually allowed him to prop himself up. Aside from the fact that his body hadn't grown and he was a bit skinny, there wasn't anything else wrong with him. At this time, Yuan took out a set of small accessories with unknown uses from the case and fitted them onto Luo Nan. They included a narrow metal belt, a buckled leather armor that resembled an ancient breastplate, and a jeweled tail ring. There was a small interlude in the middle. Yuan noticed the black wristband on Luo Nan's left hand. Is this the flywheel arm? Oh, Brother Papercut gave it to me. Then wear the tail ring on your right hand to avoid conflict. You need to wear the equipment first, then put on your outer clothes. Make sure that all the equipment is directly attached to the protective suit. Right now, Luo Nan had even attached a layer of gloves to his hands. Though the gloves had the effect of simulating skin, the feeling was still quite strange. Cat Eyes didn't understand what was going on. She simply asked, What's the use of this equipment? Wait a moment. Yuan still didn't respond immediately. She continued to instruct Luo Nan, letting him adjust the hexa ear to a certain special channel. Let's try it out. Do you sense a noise? There's a rhythm within the noise. You need to use your soul strength to adhere to it. It's just like that. Luo Nan's voice just fell when a buzzing sound rang out from his body. Yuan, Cat Eyes, and the suitcase on the ground were all pushed away by some invisible repulsive force. Fortunately, the body techniques of the two were extraordinary. They were able to maintain their balance, and Yuan still had the leisure to hold down the suitcase, preventing it from toppling over. Wow, a defensive force field. According to what President Ouyang said, this is the materialization of the power of the psychic wave network. Yuan looked at Luo Nan. Do you feel uncomfortable? Nope, I feel pretty good. Luo Nan responded with a single sentence. At the same time, he reached out to press his hand against his belt. He gently stroked it as if he had understood something. Cat Eyes also walked back and reached out to touch the breastplate. Is this the president's new achievement? The psychic wave network directly interferes with reality? Yes. In theory, the power of the psychic wave network can be mobilized to interfere with the material plane through the relevant components. However, the current conversion consumption is a bit high. Less than 1 out of 100 is saved. Is President Ouyang prepared to personally escort a certain person? If there's a mortal threat, yes. Tiskti this treatment. Cat Eyes was speechless at first, but she immediately shook her head. Then why do we need to beat around the bush? I feel that this toy is too flashy and impractical. It's too inefficient. If we really do encounter a powerful enemy, then as long as the psychic wave network is fine, we can just suppress them with a mental storm and sweep them away. Yuan did not speak. She just shared a video in the mission window. The video showed an interrogation room. Looking at the angle, it should have been taken from a surveillance camera. The camera was aimed at an unfamiliar face. This person sat in an interrogation chair with his hands fixed to the board. His head was lowered and he didn't say a word. Who is this person? Cat Eyes was still the first to ask. The one who answered was God. This is the driver of the target, Luo Yuan's flying car. During the interrogation, he was unable to reveal Luo Yuan's whereabouts. He was brought back to the nearby police station. It's him. Luo Nan's attention was also drawn over. All he saw was that this person's face was ordinary. The corners of his eyes and eyebrows were drooping. He looked a bit gloomy. God added another sentence. The video is currently fast-forwarding. It was just as God said. The video was fast-forwarding at a high speed. The two police officers participating in the interrogation were rapidly switching their movements. Their voices turned into chattering noises. However, the driver was different. He maintained a fixed posture from beginning to end. He didn't say a word and the corresponding scene didn't change at all. Yuan explained softly. He's been like this ever since he was brought back for investigation. Pay attention to the clock on the wall. The video returned to normal at a fast speed. The time on the wall clock was close to 5 p.m. Luo Nan lowered his head to check the time. It was 10 minutes ago. When the needle of the old-fashioned clock in the interrogation room crossed the top of the scale, the driver, who had been sitting in silence all this time, suddenly stretched his neck. His eyes were cast directly in the direction of the camera. His fixed gaze was as if he was looking at them through the lens of the camera. Luo Nan could see that the driver's face was constantly twitching from this moment on. His veins and muscles bulged from time to time, and the corners of his lips twisted under some sort of force. Words were spat out from the corners of his distorted mouth. All the inferior ones will be eliminated. The outstanding ones will be reordered. We have plenty of space, but we will absolutely not tolerate the entry of filth. These words were like the ravings of sleep and the words of madness. They were like a gust of sinister wind, rising from the bottom of everyone's hearts. The police officer in charge of the interrogation couldn't help but stand up. It seemed that he wanted to confirm whether or not the safety confinement facilities were complete. But right before his eyes, the twitching of the driver's face fiercely spread to the rest of his body. The extent of the twitching increased sharply, so much so that he completely lost his human form at some point. He was like a candle that had gone overboard, melting under everyone's gazes. The police officer in charge of the interrogation was nothing more than an ordinary person. He had never seen such a terrifying scene before. He retreated in a flurry amidst his screams, but he couldn't maintain his balance. He fell on his butt to the ground, bumping into the table behind him. The colleague next to him didn't perform any better than him. He flipped over his chair when he jumped up. The surveillance camera calmly recorded everything. The driver, who had melted into wax, remained in his chair. He spent roughly 30 seconds before his figure and appearance returned to normal. He maintained his posture of looking straight at the camera from beginning to end, but his face was completely different from half a minute ago. Everyone on this side saw the face clearly. Luo Yuan. Although Cat Eyes hadn't personally experienced the situation at the time, she had done her homework. She immediately hissed, "So he's the driver." The problem of Luo Yuan's disappearance under the watchful eyes of everyone at the time was most likely solved. She looked again at Luo Yuan sitting in the interrogation chair. This mysterious person originally possessed extraordinary male charisma, but after witnessing the melted wax remodeling process just now, no one dared to look straight at his face. At this time, the security personnel outside had already rushed in. There were also ability users from the society inside. Under such circumstances, Luo Yuan still faced the camera. He spoke in a manner that was neither hurried nor slow. "No matter which one it is, I will find it. I will break the old and innovate with you." The video came to an abrupt end at this point, leaving behind only a calm expression that looked straight at the camera. Cat Eyes expressed that there were far too many lunatics in the world today. How is this Luo Yuan now? Yuan still shook her head. If Luo Yuan really exists, then this person isn't. At least not in the complete sense. Cat Eyes was a bit confused. What do you mean? He Yuan didn't deliberately keep Cat Eyes in suspense. She directly answered Cat Eyes' doubts. According to a sample taken from the scene of the battle, there are some problems with the expression of this driver's genes. Although we still have to wait for the results of the test to come out, our initial conjecture is that this person may be a special life form that was rapidly produced through asexual reproduction. Moreover, he possesses extraordinary strength. Chapter 474. Cat Eye's confused state was delayed for a full 2 seconds. Only then was she able to force the corners of her lips to form a smile. Ability user clone body. Alright, a great discovery of creation. Her gaze turned to God and Si Guosheng. What do you two think? The other side was silent. Cat Eyes revealed an expression that said, "See, I knew it would be like this." She conversed with He Yuan once more. Vice President He, if my ability to understand is correct, you're saying that the person in the video is a clone. And an ability user at that? This is a preliminary judgment. So you're saying that this person is purely the result of human labor? He Yuan didn't directly answer this question. She just listed the data. There are currently at least 30 laboratories in the world that possess a complete technological system for asexual reproduction. Moreover, there are around 5 laboratories that possess a certain amount of technological reserves in the field of rapid growth. However, we have yet to receive any intelligence on anyone that dares to violate the relevant provisions of the Comprehensive Clones Prohibition Convention and push this forbidden technology into the application stage. And then, not a single one of these 30 laboratories is capable of attaching extraordinary power to a clone organism. After all, after decades of research, the current conclusion is that only extraordinary power can bestow extraordinary power. Then why did you say? But this judgment of this matter is based on reality. We can only start from the facts and make inferences according to current laws. This is a potential power that possesses a complete asexual reproduction technology and a complete set of extraordinary power. Using technology to create an entity and then bestowing it with extraordinary power. If that's the case, then it's not unreasonable. Cat Eyes rubbed her chin. Do you have a specific direction? Probably a little. In recent years, a batch of living material providers have appeared in the wilderness. Oh, I've heard of it. The gene exchange, right? It's a very famous black market. It's said that an enormous underground trading network has been formed. They specialize in providing genetic samples and living material for experiments to the major laboratories. Living material experiments? Luo Nan raised his eyebrows. He was a bit sensitive to this word. After all, his grandfather's crimes back in the day involved human experimentation. It was an important item that could not be avoided. It was also a charge that was very hard to wash off. So Luo Nan never dared to say that his grandfather was innocent. He could only pursue the academic achievements that his grandfather should have. At this time, Cat Eyes' imagination began to run wild. You're saying that this gene exchange provides various large laboratories with some sort of clone body. We have no evidence of such a transaction. I understand. The government, the military, and the funds of the major consortiums. Such high-level funding providers won't leave behind any obvious weaknesses. If they were to continue chatting like this, they would stray from the topic. He Yuan decisively changed the direction and revealed the intelligence and conclusion. At present, the understanding of the various parties regarding the gene exchange is very limited. However, there is a basic consensus. This force belongs to the wilderness, and among them, there is one or a few people who possess a type of supernatural power that can be used on a clone body, perhaps including the effect of rapid proliferation. Because of this ability, as long as there are qualified donor cells, it can quickly divide and multiply, forming a complete living body in a short period of time. It's like a bomb, but it's just like a bomb. Create a clone body and then completely vaporize it in a short period of time? Are they demons? To many laboratories they might be more like gods. Cat Eyes' ridicule hit the nail on the head. Luo Nan had a pensive look. If He Yuan's judgment was correct, then this could explain why he was unable to draw Luo Yuan's life sketch in his living starry sky back in the underground passageway. If the target itself was just a clone body that was rapidly proliferating and growing, then it simply wouldn't have the opportunity to form self-awareness. It was reasonable that no traces could be found on the mental plane. Cat Eyes and He Yuan continued to discuss related issues, but Luo Nan didn't participate. He wasn't like these two who had an extensive and deep understanding of the inner world. Even though he had crammed a few courses, his understanding of the law that only supernatural power could bestow supernatural power was shallow. Therefore, it was useless for him to listen to such matters. Under such circumstances, the only thing he could consider was the superficial things. For example, how should he deal with this enemy that was hard to sense? One of Luo Nan's greatest reliance against enemies was his mental senses. This was especially true in the living starry sky. He could sense the enemy and even attack from a distance, seizing the initiative. This kind of observing and attacking mode was already a move and rhythm that he was used to. He felt that something was wrong if he couldn't use it. This was a problem that belonged to him. Of course, he could only solve it himself. Luo Nan's consciousness wandered the living starry sky. He had no train of thought for the time being, nor did he have a goal. He could only first sort out his own sealed system clearly, checking to see if there were any loopholes. Then he pushed forward layer by layer from the inside out. Of course, it was impossible for any loopholes to exist within his own sealed system. This was more like a ritual. It was also like the instincts of a fierce beast, patrolling its territory on a daily basis. Cat Eyes must have sensed the change in pressure within the system. Cat Eyes shot a glance at him, but Luo Nan ignored her. His mind had already spread out, covering a vast area with a radius of 20 kilometers. The situation at the municipal plaza left a deep impression on him, not to mention the surroundings. The stage for tonight's performance had already been set up in the center of the plaza. It was a standard four-sided stage surrounded by a circle of temporary seats. The enormous stream of people was blocked outside. The surging heads were a dense black mass. It was just as Peony had judged. The number of people was already in the hundreds of thousands or even millions. It was already extremely difficult to search for an unremarkable target within this boundless tide of people, let alone to find a few loopholes. Not only did he have to search the star atlas, he also had to take care of the millions of students and citizens on the material plane. He had to match them one by one. Not to mention the problem of the sharp reduction of the range of his senses when it came to the material plane. Even if he could take care of everything, he would have to face such a terrifying amount of data processing. Perhaps only by turning his brain into a supercomputer would he be able to find the corresponding point in the interweaving material and mental planes. Luo Nan was completely clueless for a time. He could only drive his mind and wander aimlessly. Just like that, he saw Peony once more. She was still in the high-altitude restaurant, sitting by the window staring blankly. Ink was outside the window. It was extremely bored, combing its feathers. Alright, there was still the matter of the mutant infection. It seemed that the threat was no less than that of the clones. Truly troubled times. It was already Lidong. Luo Nan subconsciously let out a sigh. It would be great if the number of people were a bit smaller. Then a new question extended from this thought. Luo Nan thought for a moment and opened his mouth to ask, why aren't we evacuating in the current situation? There's a dangerous character like Luo Yuan, and we can't figure out his goal for the time being. Isn't it safer to cancel the parade and concert? All the inferior ones will be eliminated and the outstanding ones will be rearranged. Everyone said so. Our genius boss is certainly the most outstanding type. Don't you have any self-awareness? Cat Eyes widened her eyes, indicating to Luo Nan to understand. He Yuan had specially brought equipment to his doorstep. She didn't hesitate to offend her younger brother in order to temporarily recruit a former military elite like Si Guosheng. This set of combined punches was not just for the sake of flattering him. Luo Nan blinked. Really? Boss, please strengthen your knowledge of society. Use your brain properly. Cat Eyes was in a bad mood because of Luo Nan's inexplicable inspection in the living starry sky. Now that she had found this opportunity with great difficulty, how could she let him go? No matter what the cause is, this is still a political parade in name. Most of the people gathered here right now are youths with excess energy. They stand amidst hundreds of thousands of companions. Under the control of group mentality, they are hot-blooded and fearless. They are worried about not having a place to vent. Tonight's performance is a channel for them to vent. Right now, you're telling them that the parade has been stopped and the performance has been cancelled due to an unwarranted danger. Do you believe me if I told you that you only need to leak a bit of information and you can cause a riot in minutes? Luo Nan went, oh. He ignored Cat Eye's crazy retort. He asked He Yuan, has the clone body been sent to the laboratory? Where is it roughly right now? Cat Eyes was in a bad mood. Luo Nan's attitude caused the sharp thorns of her vicious energy to stab empty air. This was not all. The hidden and incorporeal sealed system gave her more and more pressure. Her experience grew worse and worse. It was as if she was situated in the middle of a large-scale production line that was operating at full capacity. All she could hear was the rumbling of machines. It would have been fine if she was an outsider visitor. But the key problem was that she was a member of this production line. Whether it was a worker, a machine, or a product, her position was determined by a certain person. Cat Eyes stared at Luo Nan. Her heart was restless. She really wanted to charge forward and bite this young man's throat. However, restlessness was restlessness. The thought only spun a few times in her mind before it was annihilated in a puff of smoke under the heavy pressure of the majestic system. She pursed her lips and watched Luo Nan carefully understand the relevant details of the clone body from He Yuan. She was clear in her mind. This seemingly childish big boss, who was essentially emotionless, had already driven the resources of the system he controlled to touch upon a deep level that ordinary people could not even imagine. When the resources of this boss's system were driven by his excessive rational strength, Cat Eyes, as a member of the system, was able to feel the cold and penetrating clairvoyance. She was able to sense the terrifying mutation that had unknowingly seeped into her. Honestly, the childish little show was cuter. In other words, the clone body hasn't been shipped out of the plaza yet? Yes. Only a cell sample has been sent out. Chapter 475. Soon Luo Nan found his target, the so-called clone body of an ability user. Of course, he was unable to directly observe it. He was able to lock onto it through the indirect projection of the other people present. Right now, the clone body was still in the form of Luo Yuan. His entire body was shackled from head to toe, and he seemed to have been injected with tranquilizers. However, these methods seemed a bit redundant. This person seemed to have lost all ability to think. He sat quietly on the chair, his eyes empty and without luster. Luo Nan took advantage of the fact that there were people next to the clone body to probe, but it was hard for him to get any results. To the side, Cat Eyes felt that Luo Nan was scheming something big, but after suppressing herself for a while, her death-seeking mentality prevailed. She wanted to stir up a bit of trouble, so she poked him in the open. What are you planning? Nothing. Luo Nan responded very honestly. He didn't know what Cat Eyes was thinking. Otherwise, he would have said, "You overestimate me." He really did have an attitude right now, and he was using his brain. But using his brain didn't mean that he had a direction. What he lacked the most right now was a clear train of thought. He wanted to lock onto the threat of Luo Yuan, but this clone body without any mental characteristics had cut off the move he was most proficient in. Patrolling in circles around his own territory clearly wouldn't bring him any inspiration. His current state was, to put it bluntly, very suspiciously like he was putting on airs. What should he do? Before Luo Nan could break through this obstacle, someone in the outside world contacted him. The message came from Peony, who was leaning against the window. I've sent the latest analysis to the cloud space according to the information you sent. Pay attention to receive it. Huh? What are you for? I thought you were in a daze. Hee, my dear partner. I invited Mr. Ink to follow me for work needs, not to provide you with the convenience of peeping. Please abide by professional ethics, okay? Luo Nan didn't try to explain. In any case, from the results of his peeping, Peony seemed to be smiling yet not smiling when she said these words. Her attitude was subtle. She might not necessarily be angry. Perhaps she was teasing him more than anything else. He didn't want to waste time on these minor details. He simply pretended not to hear and downloaded the information from the cloud space. He didn't want to be distracted. He just wanted to find some inspiration from the information. After all, his greatest discovery today, the stair-like distribution between ordinary people and ability users, including the capture of a few suspected second-stage infected targets, all stemmed from this. Even if he couldn't give him inspiration, he could at least give him some luck, right? The information Luo Nan downloaded from the cloud space was the latest information Peony had obtained from the Astral Dream edition of Sky Street. It was basic information extracted from the government and a few social organizations and related departments. It mainly reflected the stock composition of the Sky Street Gossip Forum, the specific management personnel, the practices of each moderator, and their basic family situations. In addition, there were also some entertainment news, paparazzi gossip, and so on, involving the more active celebrities in sensitive sectors and the people around them, as well as the relevant situations of some people in society. This information was extremely trivial. Luo Nan roughly scanned the basic data section. It was simply fragmented. It was a tangled mess. However, Peony only used a few simple data sequencing calculations and then readjusted and combined them. For some unknown reason, she was able to scoop out a few extremely important clues. Moreover, the directionality was extremely clear, realizing a directional focus. It was reasonable and convincing. Out of the 5 suspected target superiors, 3 of them are popular idols. These 3 people did not belong to the same company, and their relationship with each other was very ordinary. However, in the past 2 years, they had all carried out many prostitution activities. A relatively high-level supply chain is involved here. Based on the activity trajectories of the prostitutes and the corresponding prostitutes, the suspects of the Zhou Xian club. Hey, are you listening? Luo Nan had really been a bit distracted just now, but Peony's words had exposed him. He was a bit astonished by Luo Nan's keen senses. Peony didn't have any intention of getting angry. Is it? You have important matters to attend to? Well, you could say so. Since she was this considerate, Luo Nan didn't need to hide anything. I obtained some inspiration from you. I'll definitely ask you for guidance regarding data analysis later. Peony rested her chin on one hand as she looked out the window at the ink combing her feathers. She was a bit bored to death. Though we've been partners for a few days, I still have to pay for advanced courses. If you really do have something to attend to, then go do it. Actually, I feel that everyone's mission should have been completed by now that we've investigated to this point. Really? This involves a few special circles. I don't believe that Trigate security needs to go deeper. Let's not talk about this. I will report this information to Trigate security at the same time. As for whether or not we should continue to investigate, that will be up to the client to decide. Luo Nan really didn't put too much thought into this matter. He just said, okay. If there's nothing else, then I'll get off work early. I'll find someone to apologize to in passing. Luo Nan spoke a few polite words. I'm very sorry for delaying your date. But you can probably watch a concert with that person at this hour? This suggestion isn't bad. If it helps in the final outcome, I will thank you. I wish you good luck. It was this kind of blessing again. However, Luo Nan felt that he really did need a bit of luck right now. Soon, Luo Nan's entire mind returned to the problem from before. It was just that there was a bit of inspiration in his mind. It was just as he said. The source of the inspiration came from Peony's data analysis method. This gave him a wonderful association. He subconsciously flipped through the downloaded analytical materials, especially the comparison between the basic data and the final data chart. Luo Nan gradually understood how Peony was able to pull out the clues hidden beneath the trivial fragments through comparison, categorization, and displacement. This method made Luo Nan gasp in admiration, but it also gave him a feeling of intimacy. This was because a month ago Luo Nan had used a similar method to integrate an enormous amount of disorderly information fragments. He used a completely new perspective to create a new explanation of the old world. Yes, he was talking about the life sketches, the living starry sky. Luo Nan created the life sketches and constructed the living starry sky. Actually, it was all for the sake of sorting out the enormous amount of disorderly information brought about by his mental senses after the explosive growth of his soul strength. This was to reduce the pressure on his body and soul. For this reason, he drew a sketch of his observation target from a holistic, figurative, and fuzzy perspective. He even made a crucial choice. He gave up information on the pure material plane and only paid attention to the domain of life where the mental and material planes interfered. The problem he encountered today was precisely because of that trade-off. A clone life form, especially a clone life form that was rapidly catalyzed, would most likely not have the opportunity to make contact with the outside environment before carrying out a mission. The clone itself didn't possess the conditions to produce consciousness. The so-called consciousness that this ability user clone body had always displayed might very well be the result of remote control, or even a pre-implanted program. In this way, even if the clone body possessed a complete human form and every organ and tissue system was complete and effective, the living starry sky wasn't sensitive to information on the pure material plane. His experience in the underground passageway proved this point. The clues seemed to have been cut off here, but in reality, this was the crucial node for the birth of inspiration. Luo Nan's train of thought slowly opened up after clarifying the nature of the living starry sky. He felt that he needed to change his perspective of observation. Of course, he didn't need to reintegrate and add information on the material plane. Even if he wanted to, he needed to consider the limits of the structure of his body and soul. What he thought was that when faced with an ability user clone body, a special case that couldn't be accommodated by the living starry sky, he could consider it from the path of either non-existent or non-existent. Therefore, he used the external neuron to pull out a notebook and record a few key inspirations. There were 2 points he needed to pay attention to right now. First, the empty shell state. According to the definition of the living starry sky, the so-called ability user clone body wasn't a complete life form. It didn't exist in a state of mutual interference between the material and the mind. It was just an empty shell with a fleshly body. But it was this empty shell that displayed a lively mental state in its negotiations with Moya and the police. It didn't matter if this was a preset program or if someone was controlling it in the dark. The driving force was external. Luo Nan needed to find this clue, and it was very likely that this would involve the domain of the living starry sky. Second, extraordinary power. It wasn't difficult to create a clone person with the current clone technology system. The difficulty lay in how to make it grow quickly and how to make it possess extraordinary power. If the law of only extraordinary power can bestow extraordinary power was correct, then the target itself must possess traces of extraordinary power. Clues could be excavated from the donor cells, the embryo, and even the various stages of growth. He Yuan was certain that this was an ability user clone body, but the target didn't possess traces of the mental plane. Then the direction of his ability must be the fleshly body. This was a more realistic starting point. Luo Nan understood with a single thought. He used the surrounding police personnel and society members as a springboard. He mobilized a bit of soul strength to interfere with the material plane and scan the target. The scanning wasn't done randomly. Luo Nan could be considered a professional after cultivating in the Divine Yu Gym for a period of time. The knowledge he learned from Gym Master Xiu just so happened to be put to use. Luo Nan remembered Gym Master Xiu once said that although there were simple and nimble differences in cultivation, the essence of all fleshly body strength was nothing more than the 4 words bodily functions. The body was the foundation. Bodily functions were the direction. Fleshly body ability users were those who strengthened the foundation of the body. They mobilized the direction of bodily functions. They made it so that they could maintain the basic requirements of life and even ensure a good quality of life. They still had sufficient strength to destroy the foundation of life with pure fleshly body strength. Therefore, to observe the foundation of others, one had to start with bodily functions. One had to observe the structure of the body and observe the flow of vital energy to determine the root receptacle. Only then could one further differentiate and analyze the root nature and capture the root mechanism. Chapter 476. Even though the society had already come to a conclusion, Luo Nan still needed to reconfirm it. This helped him establish his own logic. From the looks of things, it was indeed an ability user. The body's basic strengthening, bones, muscles, and neural networks, as well as its special texture and structure, could be seen with a glance by an insider. Of course, there was the possibility of technological modification. One needed to make a further judgment from the functions of the body. The changes in the human body's functions were more hidden. One needed to start probing from the internal organs, blood flow, nervous reflexes, and so on. It had to be comprehensive. But the problem was that the target was nearly 10 kilometers away from Luo Nan. He could only indirectly capture it through the living starry sky. Relying on this method to mobilize a small amount of soul strength was like scratching an itch through one's boot. Luo Nan scratched a few times but was unable to grasp the gist of it. In the end, he could not help but ask He Yuan, "Can we meet that one side?" That one. An ability user clone. I think I might be able to find a new clue. Before He Yuan could respond, Cat Eyes had already exclaimed in admiration, "You know it's a bomb, yet you still want to go?" Luo Nan simply ignored her. He Yuan's expression did not change. She answered, "Sure." Cat Eyes was shocked, but He Yuan immediately changed the topic. "Let's meet at the laboratory. The clone will be transferred to the branch laboratory soon. You just happen to be going there." The branch laboratory. Where is it? Luonan did not react for a time. He simply asked, but Cat Eyes made a fuss over nothing. Shangding. He Yuan first instructed Si Guoxing to reserve the elevator. Then she answered, according to the established arrangements, we will go to the Shangding building and spend the night there. Considering the direction of the enemy's current information leak, inviting Mr. Luo there should be the safest choice. The Shangding Grand Xia was where the Xia City branch office was located. This name was fake. Its true security lay in the fact that the Xia City branch president, Ouyang Qin, spent all year long in the laboratory on the 13th floor of the Shangding building. Any enemy who wanted to make a move there would first need to eliminate a peak extraordinary. Sure enough, the treatment is extraordinary. This time Cat Eye's praise was genuine, but she immediately reacted. Her eyelids jumped twice. You mean the enemy is very likely to be an organization that can provide a clone with the energy it needs to divide and multiply in a short period of time cannot be underestimated. If it's an individual, then their abilities are even more inconceivable. Shi Yuan did not directly come to a conclusion, but the meaning behind her words was as such. Now Cat Eyes truly understood why the society had mobilized so many people. Right now she even felt that this sort of protective measure was too conservative. Even if she guessed correctly and bumped into them, there was still some doubt as to what effect it would have. The communication between the two of them was already very straightforward. The final layer of paper was only because of their safety instincts. They didn't want to directly mention such a fearful and powerless target. The problem was that Luonan had diverted most of his attention to the ability user clone body halfway through. His train of thought simply couldn't keep up. He only felt that deep probe would do as soon as he got there. It was simple and fast and there was no need to beat around the bush. Let's meet in advance. I think the source of the clues should still be in the square. When Cat Eyes heard this, she immediately put on a solemn expression. She solemnly raised her hand and declared, "Can I withdraw now?" He Yuan patiently explained, "We aren't sure how dangerous the plaza is. Preemptive detection might attract the other party's attention, which means preemptive contact. Isn't this the same as capturing the target? Then let the hundreds of thousands of people in the square explode into the sky?" Luonan was stupefied for 2 seconds. He looked at He Yuan's expression and finally came to his senses. He didn't say anything for a time. The atmosphere in the room turned a bit silent. A few seconds later He Yuan spoke softly, "The vicinity of the plaza is under martial law. Low and high altitude traffic levels have been sealed. We will first take a car to the periphery, then we will transfer to an aircraft. We should be able to reach Shangding in 40 minutes. I will notify the relevant personnel to send the target clone body as soon as possible. If everything goes smoothly, you and President Ouyang will be able to research and exchange relevant topics tonight." Luonan still didn't say anything. He just nodded. "The car is ready. Let's go." The group of people crowded around Luonan and headed for the backup elevator. Si Guoxing was standing guard over there. He was a bit surprised when he saw Luonan and the others come over. "We still need to wait for around 3 minutes." He Yuan paused for a moment before nodding. "Got it." Cat Eyes watched from the side. She felt that this was quite interesting. From He Yuan's perspective, this 3-minute delay could already be considered a mistake. Clearly, her forceful confrontation with Boss Luo had caused her mind to fluctuate a bit. Was it worth it? Everyone was waiting for the elevator. Luonan's head was lowered in a daze. It was unknown where his thoughts were going. There's still time. Cat Eyes thought for a moment and moved closer to He Yuan. She laughed lowly and said, "Serving a capricious boss is quite stressful." He Yuan glanced at her and actually admitted, "There's pressure." Cat Eyes chuckled, "I heard that you guys gave him a lesson before, but it seems like the results weren't that great. He still lacks the necessary general knowledge." He Yuan shook her head. "We can give Mr. Luo some general knowledge, but it's impossible for Mr. Luo to share his personal perspective with us. Once there's a conflict, it's very difficult for me to make an accurate judgment. I can only estimate based on the level of danger." "Hey, wake up." Cat Eyes extended her hand to touch He Yuan's forehead. "Do you have a fever or do you have the legendary hidden M constitution? It's good enough that I didn't beat him up just now, but here you are criticizing yourself?" He Yuan's gaze flitted across Luonan's back. "You're an expert in the field of mental sensing. Don't. A certain someone is here, don't hit my face." Alright, what's your all-encompassing sensing range? A radius of 70 meters. Seems like there's a breakthrough? Hee hee. Kibbe said that there was progress and it was a sudden increase of 40%. But what made Cat Eyes speechless was that this progress was only obtained after she bowed to Luo Nan's feet and was influenced by the closed system. Fortunately, this was only a prelude to the topic of discussion. He Yuan continued in a low voice. When people stand here, the line of sight of an ordinary person stops at the elevator door. I can see the circular corridor 30 meters away. You can see the outer walls of the building. And Mr. Luo can see the municipal plaza at least a kilometer away. Perhaps there are even more scenes of deep space that we are unable to understand. Do you agree? I agree. The deep space that He Yuan spoke of was another name for the abyss region and polar region on the mental plane. It was also called the deep sea. In any case, it had the same meaning. Cat Eyes was unable to refute this because she knew that He Yuan's assessment of the limits of Luo Nan's ability was still severely conservative. And speaking up to this point, she guessed most of He Yuan's words. Insight determines knowledge. We can't hope that the common sense of an eagle is similar to that of a fox and a rabbit. The common sense of a human and a god are completely different. And the latter is often correct. That's what you mean. Cat Eyes was unsure whether or not Luo Nan was paying attention to the conversation over here. She was also unsure whether or not He Yuan had already sensed the signs of abnormality between her and Luo Nan. But there were some words that she had to spit out. Perhaps God is indeed a head higher than us. Perhaps God is truly great and his wisdom is correct. But Secretary, common sense is different. How can knowledge be the same? Are you sure that God will always sit on our side? Are you sure that everyone will always be the same? At least we still have a mutual adaptation process. What do you think marriage is? Perhaps it would be more accurate to use marriage or experiments. He Yuan's eyes were bright and penetrating. Her words were weak but clear. We live in the darkness. We only hate the fact that we cannot see far enough. So many experiments are needed. Many kinds of combinations are needed. Perhaps we will bump into a wall and crash into a mountain. Perhaps there will be evil creatures that go against ethics. But if luck descends, hope will always be born. Cat Eyes looked stupidly at He Yuan for 2 seconds. She suddenly moved her body back to pull away some distance. Let's be frank. What religion do you believe in? He Yuan laughed involuntarily. It was at this time that Luo Nan suddenly spoke. Can I watch a recording of the fight? Luo Nan's bouncing target and his clear and bizarre train of thought were brimming with Luo Nan's personal style. But He Yuan actually understood. Are you talking about the ability user clone body? You can. But the recording time is very short. The opponent seems to have no desire to continue fighting. He Yuan operated a bit as she spoke and shared a video in the mission window. It was just as she said. After the interrogation of the target failed miserably, the members of the society who were actually Luo Nan's security team charged into the interrogation room. But the target only made 2 moves for a brief moment. It was mostly to confirm that He Yuan's words were clear. He gave up resisting and allowed the security team to subdue him. Then he entered the soul detachment state. He was a very dedicated messenger. Or perhaps it could be said that he was purely a tool to convey messages. The 2 sides exchanged blows for a bit more than a second at most. But the moment they exchanged blows, the explosion of air and the glass of the tables and chairs that were innocently destroyed showed that this ability user had a body quality and reaction ability that was above the level of a clone body. Luo Nan still did not give up on probing. He just made some slight adaptations. He set this 1 or 2 second video to play on a loop. He tried to find the pattern of the flow and focus of vital energy from within, and then he pushed it back. Gym Master Xiu's curriculum was extremely targeted, and Shuelei put in a lot of effort to make the sparring matches infinitely close to the level of actual combat. This helped Luo Nan quickly accumulate experience and insight. And he just so happened to learn the stance of an ability user's clone body in an instant. Gym Master Xiu and Shuelei focused on this stance of attack and defense. They talked about many different moves and the corresponding key points. But perhaps it would be better to be a bit more professional? Do you have the information on the 2 people fighting the target? Something like the body technique school. Cat Eyes was curious. You really can see something? Cat Eyes rolled her eyes at Luo Nan's. Oh, this. He Yuan did her duty scrupulously. She immediately dug out the relevant information on the two security personnel. She paid close attention to Luo Nan's security team. She left nothing out. Luo Nan glanced at her. Can I share this with others? I want to ask Leister for some reference. He Yuan muttered to herself for a moment and said, You can, but don't tell him the specifics of the situation here. Luo Nan didn't say anything further after getting permission. He called Shuelei and sent him the relevant information. He asked for a professional opinion. Shuelei responded with lightning speed. Our human whip hand grabs and grabs with an internal retraction force. However, this force was scattered. In order to avoid injury, the force leaked out, resulting in a sonic boom. The airflow was also swirling. The opponent's strength is firm and fierce. The explosive force is astonishing, and there's a bit of an internal refinement technique. It's not pure muscle flow, right? Yes. There should be energy circulation, storage, and a concentrated explosion. It's like what we call the Chuan Martial Arts Academy's internal breath. Or perhaps the format of fire? Shuelei was able to speak of the format of fire. This proved that Shuelei was constantly adapting to the inner world. Luo Nan laughed. His attention flashed back to the clone body 10 kilometers away. Whether it was internal breath or the format of fire, they were both profound techniques. A deep foundation was needed to utilize them. If this was truly the case, then the corresponding muscles and joints and the direction of vitality should have an inertial strengthening. Yes, his judgment was correct. Luo Nan mobilized his soul strength and was barely able to probe this level. This was thanks to the fact that the target was in a detached soul state. It was just an empty fleshly shell. It didn't cause any interference to Luo Nan. If it were anyone else, even if it were a normal person who was sleeping soundly or unconscious, the difficulty would have increased by a level. However, Luo Nan encountered a true hurdle next. If he wanted to trace the source of supernatural power, he couldn't just look at the muscles and joints. He needed to trace it back to the level of the nervous system. He needed to examine the thickness of the myelin sheath of the relevant nerve pathways, the corresponding chemical substances, and the form of electrical signal transmission. All of these details were for the sake of peeking at the efficiency and form of this person's internal energy programming. The so-called internal energy programming was something Luo Nan had comprehended from the burner simulator, the format of fire. The name was also something he came up with himself. The researchers of the archetype format created the special form of energy known as the format of fire. It was known to be a method that far exceeded the combustion efficiency of ordinary people. It mobilized the potential of the human body and embodied the direction of human evolution. Combined with their theory, the human body was considered hardware. Its functions were roughly integrated functional modules. Cultivators needed to build the most efficient operating system upon this foundation. They wanted to achieve the effect of using simplicity to control complexity, using the limited to control the infinite. Regardless of the emotions in his heart, the description of the fleshly body's abilities was extremely accurate from a theoretical perspective. Luo Nan's current train of thought was to start with the human body's blood vessels, fibers, nerves, and other basic hardware. He wanted to probe their integrated laws and train of thought to see whether or not he could lock onto the source mechanism of supernatural power. Only supernatural power could bestow supernatural power. Whether or not these words were correct didn't matter. If Luo Nan truly probed to this level, the other party would have to reveal some clues. His thoughts were quite clear. He had indeed relied on his professional insight to find a few threads of thought. He was able to deduce a few possibilities. But when the mental scan revealed the truth, the limitations of being unable to sense and being able to control things from a distance were undoubtedly exposed. He couldn't get in. He just couldn't get in. The small amount of soul strength he sent through the living starry sky was greatly affected by a few carriers. After all, there weren't any believers there. There weren't any stable and unobstructed transmission channels. He also needed to control the interference level, grasp the probing precision, and especially avoid harming the carriers. Several restrictive conditions piled together. The amount of power he could truly mobilize wasn't even 1,000th of his normal level. Whether it was precision, accuracy, or penetrative force, they were far from reaching the applicable standards. Moreover, they were greatly affected by the environment. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that a few related people were coming and going was enough to make his efforts collapse. Luo Nan was a bit irritated after several fruitless attempts. He fiercely smacked the side panel of the elevator and an empty sound rang out. His soul strength also smashed down to vent on the probing target. Everyone in the elevator gave him sidelong glances. Luonan didn't pay any attention to them. He just felt even more depressed. He could hear the echo when he smashed the wall. He knew whether it was empty or full. But when his soul strength smashed over, Luonan's movements froze. 10 kilometers away, in the public security center of the municipal plaza, the ability user clone body shackled to a chair remained motionless. The nearby monitoring personnel didn't sense any abnormalities. However, Luonan could faintly sense that when his soul strength smashed over in a venting manner, the target should have received some external stimulation. There was some feedback and it appeared in the living starry sky. Oh, it wasn't the target himself. There was no mental activity over there. What truly responded was the surrounding environment. Luonan's venting smashing attack did not control the range well. Not only did it smash onto the clone body, but it also affected the surrounding people. Fortunately, it was used for penetrative probing. It had no destructive power. But this kind of smashing attack was like throwing a stone into an abyss. An echo came from far away, reflecting the situation at the bottom. There was a circle of people inside and out, and in the middle was a living dead. It was impossible for the living starry sky to directly map the life sketches of the living dead. But when Luonan's soul strength swept over, the interference mode he specially set up to observe the internal energy programming of the living dead reacted with the target and the surrounding normal people. The target strengthened muscles, joints, nerves. These superficial fragments of information, under the unification of the fleshly combat theory, inadvertently formed a certain aspect of the internal energy programming. Even though it was just scraps and a claw, even though it was weak beyond comparison, it still revealed its unique characteristics. But this alone wasn't enough. The key lay in the fact that the interference probe mode Luonan set up was targeted at the living dead. It was targeted at the empty shell of a fleshly body that didn't possess self-awareness, powerful bodily functions, and astonishing explosive power. Any normal person would naturally radiate life psionic pressure, and the probing waves would be completely obliterated into nothingness. One was raised and the other was suppressed. The outward appearance was a clear difference between the peaks and troughs of the waves. It formed a unique echo that only Luonan could hear. This was the case. Luonan's inspiration was suddenly stimulated. He didn't hesitate at all. He went to do it. Incorporeal ripples undulated in the living starry sky. It was as if Luonan had transformed into an enormous bat at this moment. He emitted a special sound wave and it spread to all the regions covered by the living starry sky. He had done similar things before, but he had limited the range and made directional probing attacks. But now he had transformed his soul strength into a special wave to cover the entire living starry sky. He had taken the initiative to probe millions of people. His impression of this was unprecedented. He had never even thought about it before. If Luonan's control was a bit careless, if he messed up the interference mode, if the level of his power was off, and if the probing waves were not dissolved in time, he would attack millions of people at the same time. He would become public enemy number one. This was no joke. Fortunately, Luonan was used to operating on the mental plane. The buffer zone was large and his control was sufficient. Nothing unexpected happened when the wave of probing went down. The vast majority of people passed by in a daze. They were completely unaware that a deranged young man had greeted them at the same time and received a special response. At this moment, Luonan could probably say that it was as if he had the help of the gods. The method he used in the living starry sky was controlled to near perfection under the burning state of his inspiration. Even He Yuan, who was close at hand, didn't detect it. Only Cat Eyes, who was within the system, had a slight reaction. But she didn't quite understand what Luonan had done. She just faintly felt that her boss seemed to have done something extremely subversive. Her heart throbbed a bit. She really was a bit scared. After all, Luonan's performance a few dozen seconds ago was quite irritable. For this reason, she used the channels within the system to privately inquire. "What the hell are you doing?" Luonan didn't respond. The difference between transcendental observation and active contact with the same target was far greater than the difference between passive radar and active radar. And a considerable portion of the information belonged to the type of absolute reaction. He was unable to precisely control it. Waves of echoes came surging back. An enormous amount of information quickly filled all of his perceptual channels. The large machine of his self-system had to operate at full capacity to digest and identify the information. Now every believer, including Cat Eyes, felt more or less pressured. It was only because of the difference in cultivation and knowledge that there was a difference. Cat Eyes turned slightly pale. Luonan couldn't care about anything else. He used all of his mental energy to identify the information. He searched for the unique voice print amidst the large amount of disturbing noise. He gradually determined its number, location, and level. Ding! The backup elevator arrived. The elevator door opened, but it was empty inside. Zhou Xian, who was in front of the control panel, reached out and pressed the button to open the door. He cast his gaze toward Luonan. In reality, the gazes of everyone in the elevator were focused on Luonan's body. If this core character didn't move, then no matter how the others moved, it would be meaningless. Luonan's sudden eruption of irritable emotions made everyone confused and even more helpless. 2 seconds passed and Luonan still didn't move. He still had one hand on the wall and his head was lowered. It looked like he was thinking, but it also looked like he was continuing to be angry with himself. Yuan thought for a bit and took a step forward. She said softly, "Mr. Luo, we're going to..." "Wait a moment." Luonan interrupted Yuan's words. He continued to support himself against the wall with his head lowered. His breathing was a bit hurried. Not long after his voice fell, the crisp sound of a high heel hitting the ground came from far away. There were other footsteps mixed within. Then someone laughed and said, "Sister G, our luck is pretty good. We made it in time." The two people pushed open the wooden door to the safety passageway as they spoke and walked into the elevator. One of them was a young man wearing a suit and leather shoes, but he carried 2 large bags. The other was a long-haired beauty. Her hands were empty. She was dressed casually, but her makeup was exquisite. Right now she was holding her beautiful hair, slightly coiling it. It seemed that she had come out in a hurry and wanted to do a simple hairstyle. The young man was startled when he saw the people in the elevator. He nodded in a very friendly manner. There was a nameplate on his chest. Clearly he was a staff member of Mingtang culture. As for the long-haired woman in the back, she inadvertently swept her gaze around when she was fiddling with her hair. She saw the faces of the people on this side clearly. It was as if she had been electrocuted. Her back straightened and her body froze on the spot. There was another sound from the door behind them. Manager Xia popped out from who knows where. She probably felt that Luonan and the others wouldn't ride the elevator with other people. She displayed her intense desire and shouted, "Jiqiong, you guys wait." The long-haired beauty, Jiqiong, suddenly woke up with a start. She turned around in the first instant. However, she turned too quickly and the heels on her feet were too high. She nearly tripped and fell. She supported herself against the wooden door of the safety passageway before she could stand firm. She cut a bit of a sorry figure and her voice trembled. "Oh, Manager Xia. It's fine. It's fine." At the elevator entrance, Luonan finally caught his breath. He straightened his body and tidied his clothes a bit. He turned to Yuan and said, "Sister Yuan, why don't we all go together? Don't make us wait in vain." Yuan looked back. She thought for a bit before responding. Chapter 477. Luonan's words were effective in most situations, especially with the amplification effect of Manager Xia. A few seconds later, everyone had entered the elevator. However, as the elevator doors closed, the atmosphere in the enclosed car tilted towards awkwardness at a visible speed. The one with the most abnormal behavior was Jiqiong. As a C-list celebrity with a bit of fame in the company, she was quite familiar with Director Xia. With the advantage of being a woman, she was good at dealing with people. However, after entering the elevator, she stopped fiddling with her hair. She let the thick curtain of hair fall down and cover half of her face. She stood in the corner on the right front of the elevator car, looking down at the metal wall. Her body was tense, making one suspect that once the elevator door opened, she would immediately rush out and get as far away from some people in the elevator as possible. Supervisor Xia knew that there was a problem, but he knew that the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. Therefore he just played dumb and kept his mouth shut. Fortunately, Luonan had no intention of opening his mouth. He stood in the rear left corner of the sedan. Yuan and Cat Eyes were at his side, while Gouda and Zhou Xian formed a simple human wall in front of him. They separated him from the other people in the elevator. Because it was an exclusive elevator, it didn't stop at the middle floor and soon reached the exclusive passage at the bottom floor. With a ding, the elevator door opened. Ji Qiong was indeed the first to exit the elevator. She walked forward with her head down. However, even if Luo Nan and the others wanted to go to the underground parking lot, they still needed to travel with her in this half-sealed passageway. Supervisor Xia was rather dissatisfied with Ji Qiong's performance. Even if she was afraid, who was she trying to make it so obvious? He was worried that Luo Nan would be dissatisfied, so he pretended to reprimand the staff member next to him. He supported Luo Nan and said, "Little you, your time management is far too amateurish. He's so anxious. What was she doing earlier?" The employee with the surname you didn't say much. He just laughed and blocked the elevator sensors with Manager Xia, inviting Luo Nan's group to go first. After exiting the elevator, Yuan ordered God and Si Guoxing, "Go start the cars, two of them." As she spoke, she tossed out two small access keys. God and Si Guoxing caught them firmly. They looked at each other and left quickly without saying anything. The two burly men walked like the wind and quickly overtook Ji Qiong. Ji Qiong was startled. She walked too quickly and sprained her ankle. She hurriedly held onto the side wall of the tunnel and finally slowed down. Luo Nan remained silent in the elevator for a few dozen seconds. It was as if his mind had wandered off to another world. He had no reaction to the little details that happened before his eyes. He followed Yuan and Cat Eyes as they walked forward. However, just as he walked 20 meters away, he stopped without warning. Cat Eyes turned her head. "What's wrong?" "I forgot something." Cat Eyes snorted. "You're so forgetful. Don't bother with small toys." "The flowstone kit I bought for my sister. I left it at room 5621. I haven't touched it." Cat Eyes whistled. "But I think my share is pretty good. It's worth it." Manager Xia came over just in time. It's fine. Little you can make another trip. It's not a big deal anyway." Xiaoyu was obviously taken aback. Luo Nan's gaze swept over. He shook his head and said, "No need to trouble yourself. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. The elevator hasn't even gone up yet." Manager Xia maintained a fawning smile on his face, but he was already quite unhappy with Xiaoyu's hesitation. Youngsters these days can't even keep their eyes peeled. How can they get a promotion and pay raise in the future? Xiaoyu faced Manager Xia's icy gaze, and he finally understood the social truth that an arm cannot twist a thigh. He revealed a smile and said, "I'll be right back." Then he hurried to the elevator 20 meters away. He was still carrying two large bags on his back, but there was no one here to help him. Manager Xia hated that he couldn't bring out a chair and invite Luo Nan to sit down and rest. His smile grew even more brilliant. "Just wait a moment, sir." Ji Qiong rubbed her ankle before he could finish speaking. She whispered, "Shall I leave my bag behind?" Xiaoyu instinctively went, "Oh." He walked back and handed one of the bags to Ji Qiong. Only then did he leave under Manager Xia's cold gaze. Ji Qiong couldn't care less about Manager Xia's thoughts. She spoke softly, "It's almost time for the rehearsal. I'll go backstage first." Manager Xia's gaze swept between her and Luo Nan's body. It was better to have less trouble than less trouble, so he responded, "Fine. Don't be in too much of a hurry. It wouldn't be good if you get hurt and delay the performance." Ji Qiong let out a breath of relief after obtaining Manager Xia's permission. She was just about to turn around and leave when a voice suddenly rang out by her ear. It was extremely close. "I want to ask you about something." Ji Qiong jumped in fright. She turned around in fright, her hair flying up and sweeping across Luo Nan's face. The eyes of the other person narrowed and they fell into Ji Qiong's eyes. She only felt that the glow in those eyes was growing more and more treacherous. She reflexively lowered her head to avoid the gaze. She said, "I'm sorry," but she didn't receive a response from Luo Nan. She raised her head again and she saw the young man in front of her staring fixedly at her. What in the world does this person mean? Ji Qiong was a bit flustered, but there was still a bit of restlessness in the depths of her heart. In this short period of time, her secret relationship with He Donglu had been exposed by this young man and a few others. She still remembered He Donglu's helpless appearance after he left the house in disappointment. There was no doubt that this 16 or 17-year-old so-called boss Luo had an extremely high status. It was so high that even He Donglu, this super-rich young master, had to be fearful of him. Of course, she felt restless from the bottom of her heart to be targeted by such a character. But if the reason for his extraordinary attention was because he fancied her beauty, then it would be a better result. It didn't matter whether she was caught in the act or not. In any case, as long as he wanted to make a move, she wouldn't have the slightest ability to resist. If she could develop such a young and high-status client, then it would be a blessing in disguise. However, she thought about it further. The well-known dance instructor of the city, Cat Eyes, had a deep relationship with this person. And there was also that Sister Yuan whose words carried a lot of weight. She wasn't inferior to Ji Qiong in terms of appearance and figure. It couldn't be that this young man was a little mischievous. He was experienced in this path, seeking excitement and liked this sort of style. While she was letting her imagination run wild, Luo Nan extended his hand without any warning. He pulled a strand of hair from her shoulder and twirled it between his fingers. Ji Qiong was stupefied on the spot. Even though she was naturally bold and unrestrained, she couldn't help blushing in this kind of situation. And the cold and clear gazes of the two people of the same gender made her heart palpitate with guilt. However, what made her restless the most was still Luo Nan's eyes. With her hair pulled, she was forced to look at Luo Nan face to face at a close distance. She saw that this young man was probably wearing contact lenses. The excessively bright reflections covered most of the information, but she couldn't see the lust and greed that she was most familiar with. The corresponding expression and gaze were like that of a child playing with a new toy, revealing a feeling of curiosity and satisfaction like, "So it's like this." Ji Qiong had never seen this type of person before, but she had heard of him. He was simply a type of pervert who didn't treat people as people. He was someone who could torment people to the extreme. If he was someone like that, she would hide as far away as she could. "Teacher Ji." Luo Nan opened his mouth once more. Ji Qiong shuddered. She really couldn't bear such an overly polite and lofty form of address. "You don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." Luo Nan didn't care about Ji Qiong's reaction. From his perspective, the educational video he watched in the morning had gone through several hours of filtering. The deepest impression left behind was actually Ji Qiong's long hair, which was like thick smoke. After taking the opportunity to touch it and play with it, it could also be considered a wish. He went straight to the point. "There's something very important that I want to ask you. This is a private matter, but I hope you can understand." The more polite Luo Nan was, the more worried Ji Qiong became. She looked at Manager Sha for help. The latter was also confused, but no matter what, he did not dare to offend Boss Luo. He could only pretend not to see and clumsily turned his head away. A strand of Ji Qiong's hair was still in his grasp. There was nowhere to hide. Luo Nan probed a few times, but Luo Nan still wouldn't let go. He could only respond helplessly, "Boss Luo, you've said your goodbyes." She had already prepared herself to be embarrassed, but no matter how much she maintained her mental defenses, the words that came out of Luo Nan's mouth still stupefied her in the first instant. "How many women have you had sex with recently? Who are they?" Ji Qiong was tongue-tied. Her face turned from red to white, then from white to red. Her head was filled with the dizziness brought about by the blood rushing to her head. Something was stuck in her throat and she couldn't force it out no matter how hard she tried. Seeing this, Luo Nan expressed his understanding. "I'm sorry. My question was too broad. Tell me, how long have you been in a relationship with Lan Lin? What about He Donglu? I know that you had sex with Lan Lin in room 5627 this morning, and your relationship with He Donglu was broken off. But before today, did the two of you have any contact? Do you have any understanding of Lan Lin's relationships inside and outside the company? Can you name a few of them? It would be best if they were within the circle. Are you crazy?" 5 or 6 questions came smashing over like a barrage of cannons, directly smashing Ji Qiong's mental defenses. She suddenly moved back, not caring about the strands of hair that were torn. The pain made her lose her composure. Emotions of fear and shame rushed to her head. Her brain heated up and she fiercely slapped Luo Nan. Luo Nan's fingers, which had been fiddling with his hair a moment ago, firmly grabbed Ji Qiong's wrist before her slap could reach his face. Compared to the slap, Luo Nan didn't use much strength, but the corresponding symbol of restraint and control gave Ji Qiong an excessive psychological impact. Ji Qiong recovered a bit of her ability to think at this time, but the little bit of resources she had was invaded by fear and humiliation. Right now, Luo Nan's side was calm and callous. Manager Sha's face was stiff. Even Xiaoyu, who was in front of the elevator, turned his head to look back. 5 pairs of eyes stared directly at Ji Qiong. It was as if the bright and beautiful clothes that Ji Qiong was used to were stripped bare in an instant. The face and dignity attached to it were torn to the ground, and then they were ruthlessly trampled on. Ji Qiong's legs went soft. She could no longer stand, but she subconsciously struggled to save herself. She faced Manager Sha, who she was most familiar with, and screamed, "He's talking nonsense. He's talking nonsense. Hurry up and call for help. Manager, hurry up and save me." No matter how much Ji Qiong struggled, Luo Nan's hand remained extremely steady. There was no difference between his hair and his wrist. Luo Nan tried to reason with Ji Qiong, who was excited to the point of insanity. "I know that I wasn't very polite just now, but this information cannot be hidden. Otherwise it will cause a disaster." Ji Qiong didn't care about a disaster. Right now she was 100% disaster. She struggled and cried, and her volume was 10 streets louder than Luo Nan's. Luo Nan frowned. Cat Eyes coughed and reminded him, "You can ask in a more private place." Luo Nan shook his head. "The answer must be made public. Let others hear it." Luo Nan's gaze shifted as he spoke. The elevator door 20 meters away had already opened. Little Yu, who should be running errands, did not go in. Dad, he jogged back. "Hey, you guys are going too far." Little Yu. Even though Manager Sha approved of Luo Nan's actions 100% in his heart, he was worried that the situation would get out of control and cause an even worse accident. Therefore he shouted at Luo Nan to stop. Little Yu didn't pay attention to him at all. He ran faster and faster. Luo Nan gazed at this young man who was filled with righteous indignation. He suddenly spoke, "Go back. Everyone mind their own business." Little Yu continued to speed up. "Are you taking care of others when you do this?" Bang! The special gun barrel produced electric currents and sound disturbances. The metal bullet was accelerated by electromagnetism before it shot out. It pierced straight through Little Yu's shoulder, and flesh and blood splattered violently in an instant. Little Yu suddenly staggered and leaned to the side. He half knelt on the ground, groaning miserably. "Oh no!" Manager Sha cried out in alarm. His volume was not much lower than Ji Qiong's. Half a second later, Manager Sha's screams and his thoughts were both interrupted. He did not understand at all why the situation had suddenly turned out like this. Luo Nan grabbed the stupefied Ji Qiong with one hand while his other hand maintained a firing stance. The electromagnetic gun's muzzle moved down slightly. This time he locked onto the vital point of Little Yu's back. Yuan stepped forward without a sound. She used her shoulder to block the muzzle and her figure. She spoke softly. "Get back." At the same time she spoke, Little Yu's low groan came from 10 meters away. His syllables gradually turned clearer. "You're really going too far. Good genes and bad genes are handled by different groups. They're arranged well. But to run into an unreasonable target like you is really bothersome." Though Luo Nan's line of sight was blocked, his senses on the mental plane were more intuitive than his eyes to a certain degree. He listened to the strange sound coming from not too far away. He searched for deeper veins in the surroundings and spoke in passing. "Am I good or bad? Then you really are asking the wrong person. I'm afraid my answer isn't objective." Before his voice faded away, Yuan suddenly charged forward from above the long corridor. Luo Nan instantly expanded his field of vision, but he still could not see Little Yu's figure. This was because he and Yuan had collided together in the first instant. It was unknown when, but a cold light flashed in Yuan's hand. A sharp blade tore through the air, but it did not hit its target. Instead, the shockwave of sonic boom that followed caused the corridor to distort. The shockwave was far too fierce. The density of the air was seriously out of balance. Yuan and Little Yu entered a state of close combat. Back at Frost River Reality, Yuan had used the move Kill in 10 steps to instantly kill an Ablatum Knight of the Order of Justice, Ghost Thunder's Arc Light Blade. Unexpectedly, it was completely useless. After 4 consecutive collisions, the sonic boom grew higher and higher. In the end, it turned into a distorted and strange sonic boom that scraped against one's eardrums in pain. Manager Sha and Ji Qiong fell limply to the ground. They did not even make it through the first wave of impact. It was as if a heavy fist had bombarded their ears. "Hurry up and leave." Cat Eyes pulled Luo Nan to retreat. His opponent's fleshly side ability was at least B rank. The aftermath of the impact possessed sufficient lethality. It was best for them, the mental side, to put some distance between them. Luonan did not move. He shook his head and said, "It's over, for now." He Yuan returned to Luonan's side as soon as she finished speaking. She withdrew her arc light blade, but her drooping hands were trembling slightly. Chapter 478. The shockwaves of several consecutive head-on collisions had caused serious damage to this exclusive underground passageway. The concrete walls were covered in cracks. The majority of the lighting in the 40-meter area had been destroyed during the battle. The remaining ones quickly experienced short circuits and other malfunctions. The backup elevator also seemed to have a problem. The metal door of the car was jammed due to the deformation of the wall. After a few banging noises, a sharp electronic alarm rang out. It connected with the alarm bells that had been ringing inside the building for a long time. It was noisy to the point of annoyance. The lights in the car were still usable. They were projected from 20 meters away, barely saving the brightness of the long corridor. He Yuan relied on the severely weakened glimmer to lock onto the ruined body that could hardly be called a human. She swept her gaze around to confirm whether or not the target had the ability to rise again. Behind her, Luonan wanted to circle around to take a look, but she stopped him. On the other side, Cat Eyes scratched her chin and made an assessment. So this is the clone body of a rapid catalysis type ability user? If we calculate the explosive power, its peak combat strength is slightly stronger than B rank, but it only has the strength of 4 strikes. In reality it should be B rank. Even so, it's quite dangerous. At the very least, I would be dead in close combat. He Yuan shook her head slightly. It has the strength of at least 6 to 7 strikes. But Mr. Luo's first shot destroyed the joints of its shoulder, and I used the format of fire to intentionally increase its explosive power during the fight. I destroyed the activity of its tissues and cells, causing the collapse of its body structure ahead of time. That's why I was able to have this kind of effect. You can't underestimate its self-control and self-defense capabilities. Even though it has certain flaws, it isn't specialized in the fleshly side. It's best not to have this kind of idea. He Yuan added relevant records as they conversed. She placed them in the mission channel and shared them with all the operation members. Cat Eyes saw how serious she was, so she asked, "Then what about us long-range occupations? Increase the instantaneous destructive power, especially the joints and the key muscle groups that support the fight. They should be the targets of the first wave of attacks. Of course, the most important thing is to pull away. It doesn't sound too difficult. How's its combat awareness?" He Yuan was silent for a moment before responding. "It's similar to an unmanned drone. Artificial intelligence or long-range control." He Yuan raised her head to look at her. Cat Eyes shrugged. "Fine. Pretend I never asked." Luonan never spoke while He Yuan and Cat Eyes were conversing. Though He Yuan had stopped him from approaching, he was still able to use his naked eyes, mental senses and many other methods to observe the pile of rotten flesh before him. From his point of view, Cat Eyes had indeed asked a foolish question. To be able to confront a powerhouse like He Yuan head-on, and under the pressure of her clumsy but skillful means, he was able to accurately judge and intercept the most lethal arc light blades many times, causing them to return in vain. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he wasn't at a disadvantage. There was probably no artificial intelligence that could do this. However, it was not necessarily the case that the controller was focused and going all out. In the time it took for sparks to fly off a flint, Luonan truly paid attention to the various traces that flowed past on the mental plane. The operation of the living starry sky and the distortion of the mental curtain were not spared even the slightest change. He had always believed that the person who could make the clone body's empty shell work must be a controller from a certain direction. The facts proved his conjecture. Though the traces were weak and the signs were minuscule, Luonan was still able to find a fine transmission path within the dense and complex mental curtain. Though the soul strength transmitted by the opponent wasn't enough to blow even the slightest breeze, it was enough to sense and transmit information. During the process of He Yuan and the clone body fighting, this information transmission path didn't show any traces of increasing bandwidth or load. It was so stable that it made one's heart palpitate. Luonan was unable or unwilling. He chose the latter. This was because the origin of this mental curtain came from the polar domain. "Boss, your dog nose is quite sharp." After Cat Eyes finished conversing with He Yuan, she slapped Luo Nan's shoulder with force and praised him. It was Luo Nan who gave them a warning after they entered the elevator on the 56th floor. The series of words and actions that followed were all to probe the clone body's reaction and further clarify its target. Though they had yet to capture any direct evidence, they were 100% clear on the opponent's scheme. However, the plethora of coincidences in and of themselves was a powerful proof. So it turns out that the gene exchange not only deals in high-end business, but it also deals in garbage disposal. Cat Eyes turned her gaze back to the two ordinary people. Their lives weren't in danger from the wave of impact just now, but their minds were muddled. Perhaps they would suffer from brain concussions or other sequelae. There's no need to cater to other people's definitions. He Yuan confirmed that the clone body couldn't rise again, so she notified the logistics personnel to come over and deal with the aftermath. She turned her attention back to Luo Nan. The clue Mr. Luo found is extremely valuable. Even without direct evidence, it can be seen that the gene exchange maintains a high level of attention towards the current situation of the mutation infection in Xia City. She paused for a moment and said, "If Mr. Luo hadn't come to the plaza today and made a new discovery, the opponent's progress would have been above Trigate Securities." Cat Eyes agreed with this judgment. "This little you really is a person. It's just that he's been replaced by a clone body. Have you figured out the replacement node yet?" "Not yet." "Mr. Luo?" He Yuan felt that Luo Nan had been silent for a bit too long, so she deliberately greeted him. Cat Eyes simply hooked onto Luo Nan's arm. She laughed and said, "Boss, if this really has something to do with your outsourcing business, then Her Majesty Empress Wu or Trigate Security clearly found the wrong contractor. There must have been no public bidding, right? But how do you know that he's a clone body? It seems that aside from laboratory testing, there aren't any effective methods of distinguishing him." "By listening to the sound to determine his position." Luo Nan responded with a low and hoarse voice. "Bullshit. That's the truth." Luo Nan had no interest in bickering with Cat Eyes. Right now he appeared to be carefree and relaxed, but he was actually quite exhausted. On one hand he had to monitor the sound source of the clone body coming from the entire plaza. On the other hand he had to lock onto the mysterious information channel coming from the polar domain. On the other hand he had to make a timely response to the plane of reality. Doing three things at once made him quite exhausted. But then again the two useless words he exchanged with Cat Eyes gave him another inspiration. Since a certain person was so idle he might as well give her a bit of work. She was unable to monitor the polar domain, and there was no need to make an immediate response to the scene. But as long as the corresponding details and characteristics were clear, she could share the relevant information and act as a monitor. Cat Eyes felt quite bad being covered by his gaze. Luo Nan felt even worse. The fine strand of soul strength was still lingering in the surroundings. It remained in a weak region from beginning to end. It wasn't like President Ouyang's warping of space and time, nor was it like Her Majesty Empress Wu's earth-shattering power. However, maintaining close monitoring of it was an extremely exhausting matter. Luo Nan originally had a wraith sign under his command that specialized in this sort of work. But now that the Darksider species had been sent into the cloud world, and it had even been forcefully planted into the body of a mushed-mouth ape, it showed signs of growth and evolution. Luo Nan was unable to call it out no matter how hard he tried. He had no choice but to personally go into battle. He continued to pour resources and the consumption of his mental strength grew greater and greater. The only thing that could be considered gratifying was that Luo Nan's pure observation mode had made new contributions. Though he had locked onto the opponent didn't have a reciprocal response. The opponent didn't hide too much. And so, Luo Nan slowly came to a realization. The core of this strand of soul strength that came from the polar domain wasn't He Yuan. It wasn't Cat Eyes. It wasn't even Luo Nan himself. As for Ji Qiong, Manager Sha, and the pile of clones that were like rotten meat, none of them were its target. Cat Eyes was a bit impatient from waiting in the dark and noisy hallway. The logistics really took a long time. How about we retreat first? I feel that asking about the romantic history of that long-haired beauty will help boost our spirits and clear our thoughts. Of course, if there's someone who can hear the location and determine the location of all the clones in the municipal plaza, then just pretend I didn't say anything. Luo Nan was quite capable, But the focus of his attention was no longer on that. Cat Eyes withdrew her hand from the crook of his arm at this time. She went to pick up the unconscious Ji Qiong and Manager Sha. She had the self-awareness of being Luo Nan's assistant. He Yuan didn't raise any objections. After all, guaranteeing Luo Nan's safety was the #1 priority. If Little Yu had really listened and gone upstairs during the fight just now, then no matter how suspicious they were, they wouldn't have taken the risk to make a move. He Yuan arranged a few more details to the logistics team, then indicated to Luo Nan to move. Luo Nan went, "Oh," and slowly began to move. But He Yuan patted his upper arm just as he took a step forward. "Mr. Luo, the gun." "Oh, I forgot." Luo Nan was still holding a one-shot electromagnetic handgun in his hand. The safety was still on right now. He smiled at He Yuan, turned off the safety and stuffed the gun back into its holster. He Yuan spoke softly, "That shot was very stable. But if you can't confirm the threat level of the target in the first instant, then the restraining effect on the leg is better. It's also fine on the lower abdomen, which can cause sufficient damage. At the same time, if there's a misjudgment, the current medical conditions can save the situation." She paused a bit after speaking to this point, but within 10 meters, a direct hit to the head or chest isn't a problem. "Secretary He, does your family's boss run an assassin company? Speaking of which, is there anyone who can help?" Luo Nan raised his hand, "Give me one. Sister Yuan needs to react in time in case something unexpected happens." "Don't jinx it. Seeing that you're the boss, I'll give you the long-haired beauty. We can pretend that we didn't see you taking advantage of us." Luo Nan didn't respond to this kind of vulgar joke. He walked over and took Ji Qiong. With his current physique, holding 100 kilograms in one hand was no problem at all. Ji Qiong was still unconscious. Her long hair spilled down, covering half of her charming face. She was delicate and charming. Luo Nan's gaze swept past without pausing. Instead, his gaze paused on the bag by Ji Qiong's feet. "What about their luggage?" "TSK. It's nothing more than cosmetics, performance clothes and the like. If you're really that kind-hearted, then don't torment her. Are you still hoping for her to go on stage and sing in her current state? Let the logistics pack up." He Yuan stopped the meaningless discussion and indicated for Luo Nan and Cat Eyes to speed up. The three followed the long corridor for another 100 steps before entering the safety passageway. They left the messy battlefield behind them. There wasn't a single person on the long corridor for now. The alarm bell was still ringing, but the lighting of the elevator at the end finally welcomed the fate of short-circuiting. The darkness grew a bit thicker. A sizzling sound seeped out from the ink-like darkness, but it was soon drowned out by the clamor of the alarm bell. But there was a massive shadow on the ground that wasn't affected at all. It grew from small to large and continued to expand. Soon it broke through the thin outer layer of bindings and was completely exposed to the air. Then it slid along the ground and directly collided with a wall. After a slight pause, the expanding shadow continued to slide. It was perpendicular to the ground and climbed up along the wall. Buzz. Boom. The powerful sound of electricity, the sound of metal bullets piercing through the air, and the sound of flesh piercing rang out. It was as if the expanding shadow had been struck by lightning. Its body, which had already begun to take shape, instinctively contracted violently with the location of the bullet as the core. And at this time the sound of piercing through the air rang out from the other end of the long corridor. Someone used their powerful arm strength to throw a specially made flare over here. The powerful light tore apart the dark curtain of the long corridor, completely exposing the scene beneath the curtain of darkness. Fine details were revealed. On the floor of the long corridor was the backpack that Xiaoyu had carried during the fierce battle. The backpack had been flung away before the fierce battle, but it had already burst open. The junk inside was scattered all over the ground, and there were even specks of mucus on the surface. And above the backpack, a lump of deformed flesh was stuck to the wall. The outer layer of mucus was wrapped in a layer of mucus. This was the source of the mucus on the backpack. It was hard to find a reference object to describe its ugly appearance, not to mention that it was currently twitching violently. It looked to be in extreme pain. Luo Nan, He Yuan, and Cat Eyes walked out from the entrance of the safety passageway. They looked at the strange scene in the distance under the interweaving of powerful light and shadows. Cat Eyes was very astonished. The format of fire can enchant bullets? It was very clear that she had gone off topic. He Yuan's brows were locked tight. She held the electromagnetic handgun in her hand. The gun was Luo Nan's, but she was the one who had fired the gun. The effect looked decent, but it was of no help in explaining the current situation. Luo Nan squinted his eyes and carefully observed the ugly lump of flesh in the distance. His observation strength was quite strong on the mental plane. He even borrowed the society's database to search, but he was still unable to find the origin of this thing. He was also unable to figure out what it was used for. Right now, the flesh on the wall seemed to have suffered heavy injuries. Its body was clearly shriveled, and viscous fluids flowed out from the place where its body was stuck to the wall. Under the powerful light of the flare, an extremely bizarre silver-gray color appeared. The viscous fluids flowed down from the wall. Some of them seeped into the cracks in the wall that had just formed, but most of them flowed to the ground. They continued to spread under the tension. As this process progressed, the silver-gray luster, which originally had a metallic texture, gradually dimmed. Its surface became coarse, and it was gradually covered with a layer of fine velvet. A pathogenic strain? A biochemical weapon? He Yuan and Cat Eyes spoke at the same time. But He Yuan pulled the trigger once more as she spoke. The powerful magnetic field generated by the electromagnetic coil propelled the metal bullet out of the muzzle. A distance of 60 meters was not worth mentioning under the initial speed of 5 times the speed of sound. The bullet seemed to have just left the muzzle when it pierced diagonally into the mucus-covered wall. Chapter 479. Seeing the effects of He Yuan's gunshot, Cat Eyes was truly shocked. "Are you a mage?" Luo Nan shouted. "The enemy has cut off the wiring within the wall. It's guiding the electricity." Before Luo Nan's voice fell, the leaping electrical fire had already covered the entire area of mucus. The dense bacterial strains on the surface instantly began to grow crazily, causing the mucus area to be like boiling porridge. Bubbles rose one after the other. Half a second later, a grayish-white shadow the size of 2 knuckles pounced out of one of the bubbles that exploded. Cat Eye's mental senses were not given for nothing. She immediately confirmed the species of the target that had suddenly appeared. Rats. With the appearance of the first rat came a string of similar short-living creatures. They came in an unending stream, seemingly endless and inexplicably strange. They were small in size, but they shouldn't be things that could be concealed by a layer of mucus. Many of them were flesh-colored larvae within the spreading rat swarm. But after staggering a few steps, their fur gradually grew and their skin turned gray. Their exceptionally sharp incisors flickered with a cold light. Squeaking sounds interweaved with ear-piercing alarm bells, making one's scalp go numb. Cat Eyes looked as if she was watching a clumsy sci-fi drama. After these bacterial strains mature, they directly breed rats? How many links are there in the middle? What about nutrition? What about energy? Guiding electricity. Absorbing energy and transforming it. He Yuan found an explanation. It might not be correct, but there was no need to get to the bottom of things at this time. More importantly, the enemy spawned this rat swarm. What were they trying to do? Soon the movements of the rat tide became clear. They didn't launch an assault. Instead, they scattered and fled in all directions after touching the ground. There were rats in every direction and their movements were swift and nimble. The 3 were stunned for a moment. He Yuan was the first to react. Gene samples. The answer was a bit jumpy, but Luo Nan and Cat Eyes understood in an instant. Since Little Yu was in charge of collecting inferior genes, perhaps he had already obtained some results and was carrying them with him. Now that the clone had collapsed and the mission was interrupted, the early gains were at risk of becoming a wedding dress for others. Of course, they had to try to cut their losses. Luo Nan and the others were not too clear on how the enemy carried the gene samples through the rats. But they destroyed whatever the enemy did. Such a train of thought was most likely correct. Luo Nan's train of thought was clear, and he discovered a few new circumstances. Some of them passed through the cracks in the wall. Originally, with the degree of cracks in the wall, the rats wouldn't be able to pass through, but these catalyzed clone bombs showed corresponding capabilities. The young rats in front of them that had yet to fully grow exploded. After a few waves of explosions, they forcefully widened the crack and opened up a path of flesh and blood, giving their brethren space to escape. In this way, in front of the wall, behind the wall, and in every corner there were shadows of rats leaping about. It made people dizzy and they couldn't even count the number for a while. Boom! The loud bang and the explosion happened at the same time on the cracked wall. The side wall of the reinforced concrete instantly broke open. Gravel flew everywhere and dust flew everywhere. The rats that had just broken out were instantly crushed into pieces by such a powerful explosion. The ugly meat patty that had been crawling along the wall was also hard-pressed to escape. Its entire body was torn into several pieces, and its silver-gray body fluid sprayed out. But most of it evaporated into nothingness within the flames. In the next moment, an exoskeleton armor strode in through the hole in the wall. It was painted with a special azure color like the sea, and it had a fully sealed helmet with multiple edges. It showed that this was a deep blue walker. In a certain sense, it represented the highest combat power of an official soldier of the world government. The one controlling the deep blue walker was God. After breaking through the wall, the distorted flames around his body spread out, covering the rat tide in all directions. He used the format of fire to deal fatal damage to these suspected carriers of the gene samples. This was the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Or perhaps it should be said that this was the embodiment of the importance of the reserve team. Yuan had sent the 2 bodyguards to drive the car when they had just exited the elevator earlier. In fact, it was a code to activate the deep blue walkers. The 2 former elite burners of the military were C rank at most in terms of their unarmored abilities. They could wear the deep blue walkers and part of their abilities could enter the B rank range. They were enough to hold their own. Yuan didn't reveal her 2 trump cards even when she was fighting with little Yu. It would be a lot easier to mobilize them now. Do a complete sweep. Collect. Don't let go of any body tissue. Yuan naturally raised the level of treatment once again after this incident. God acted according to his orders. Before the logistics team arrived, he would first do the cleaning. However, the situation just now was far too treacherous. It exceeded common sense. After he collected a few pieces of the ugly meat pie, he couldn't restrain himself for once. He took the initiative to ask in the mission channel, "Vice President, is this a nest? You've seen one before?" "Yes. I've seen one when I was carrying out a mission in District 87. Later, I used the main laser cannon on the ship to eliminate it." District 87. That's a mature body. You're saying that what we see right now is a nest larva? Cat Eyes was unwilling to be left out. She joined the discussion. A nest? Luonan actually knew the relevant general knowledge, but he had to wait for the others to expose it before he connected the theory with reality. He cast his gaze toward the last remaining piece of meat pie on the ground. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, it would be very hard to imagine that this was the legendary factory that produced low-end mutants. It was the fatal source of the genetic pollution of the era of distortion. The so-called nest was something that only appeared in the middle of the era of distortion. It was said to be the product of the Earth's natural environment being completely distorted. It was a deformed biological factory. It was like a methane pool of mutant nature. It gathered countless DNA fragments, causing them to collide and combine with each other to finally produce large amounts of mutant creations. The vast majority of these nest larvae possessed serious genetic defects when compared to the early natural mutants. Moreover, they would soon become food for the surrounding vicious beasts. But it was in this form that the mutant DNA fragments spread throughout the world like a plague. It was said that these DNA fragments had strong expressions and were very difficult to completely degrade. The powerful mutants wouldn't be fatally affected, but it was like burying a ticking time bomb for the surviving normal birds and beasts and the vagrants of the wilderness. Due to the rapid spread of large amounts of mutant DNA, the world government had entered an active defense phase 40 years after the mutant calamity. The species of mutants throughout the world continued to rise without end. It had to be said that this was greatly related to the appearance of the nest. Moreover, no one was able to say for the time being what effect these large amounts of foreign genes would have under the current genetic background. But the academic community basically held a pessimistic attitude. Yuan had asserted in class that the lingering poison brought by the nest wouldn't be apparent to humans within 1 or 2 generations. But as the population continued to multiply, the mutant DNA would play a more and more important role in the genetic process of the race. This was without a doubt an era of genetic pollution. Before the Third World War, there were approximately 10 million species and 1 billion genes on Earth. But 40 years after the war, not counting the mutants, the number of native species had sharply decreased to 700,000. Over 2/3 of the genes could only be seen in the gene library. It was also during these 40 years that the government lost control over the wilderness, which led to the complete loss of control over gene flow and other phenomena. In many regions, foreign genes already occupied an absolute dominant position. This was tantamount to a historical extinction of a species. Luo Nan recalled the knowledge he had learned and combined it with the situation that had just occurred. He spoke in a low voice. This nest. It's artificial, right? Artificial nest. The gene exchange has this kind of technology. Let's create artificial wombs. With this kind of technology he can forcefully enter the Star Alliance Committee. He'll be the leader of the world later. Cat Eye's words could be said to be in agreement but not in agreement. She could be said to be refuting but not refuting. He sounded a bit guilty and weak. Facts speak louder than words. Luo Nan personally witnessed the information pathway from the polar domain pour relevant power and information into the closed bottle openings of his backpack. The relevant cell tissues were stimulated and mixed with each other. Then the ugly meat patty swelled and the rat horde was born. The entire process was bizarre but clear. Clearly, the other party possessed methods and abilities that exceeded common sense. Otherwise, Luo Nan would have pulled He Yuan and Cat Eyes along with him to attack. The deep blue walker under God's control had already completed its initial harvesting in the long corridor that had already changed beyond recognition. It was walking over here. Luo Nan suddenly thought of something at this time. Check Ji Qiong's bag as well. That little Yu has also emptied his hands. God just happened to walk over to the bag. He picked it up when he heard Luo Nan's words, but he felt that something was wrong the moment he touched it. The side of the bag that was pressed against the ground appeared quite damp. It had already been soaked with some sort of liquid. And there was a tiny crack on the corresponding ground. It should have been caused by the aftermath of He Yuan and Little Yu's battle. There was absolutely no liquid leaking out just now. Luo Nan was certain. He had discovered that there was a problem with Little Yu's backpack, so he had also monitored Ji Qiong's backpack. He had been paying attention to the internal situation before the rat tide arrived. This was also when the rat tide erupted from the nest. Luo Nan's entire attention was shifted over to determine the rat tide's formation pattern and escape trajectory. That's right. Something must have happened at that time. God tore open the bag in one go to confirm the situation inside. But Luo Nan didn't need to look to know. One of the cosmetic bottles is broken. The others are all intact. Luo Nan walked over there as he spoke. He Yuan hesitated for a moment, but she didn't stop him. She quickly followed. Was this a diversion? Then the information was leaked and shifted. Luo Nan pursed his lips. His expression was grim. He felt a bit embarrassed. Everything was clearly within his grasp. The other party didn't detect his observation at all, but they still used ruthless methods to play him. Any opponent that came from the polar domain really couldn't be underestimated. The building's security personnel and the society's logistics team arrived at practically the same time at this time. After a short negotiation, the logistics team relied on the tiger skin of government authority to send the security personnel away. They quickly gathered over here. Luo Nan stood next to the deep blue walker who was taller than him by half a body. He didn't look at the bag. He just stared at the crack on the ground. It seemed that he wanted to see flowers from within. In reality, he had locked onto the soul strength that came from the polar domain. The other party was still lingering in the surrounding area. It seemed that he hadn't finished. Fine. Actually, he was observing Luo Nan in secret. He was probably very interested in Luo Nan.